Hello and welcome to the first episode of the Evening Paper. I'm your host, James Brown. And for the last week or so, I planned to start recording this on June 28th, 2018. The idea was to do a show about media and culture. And that's what I definitely will do. And I had this whole big plan. I had a whole bunch of ideas to go into and break down, and they seem trivial at the moment because something horrific happened, and it spoke to both media and culture, and it was just hard to ignore. And most of those things we can revisit at another time. I'm speaking of the shooting inside a Maryland newsroom. Those of you who are watching the video of this can see an article on it with me. 5 killed, several more injured at the Capital Gazette newsroom in Maryland. A suspect barged into the newsroom and started shooting people. You know, as an ex-newsroom person, it seems impossible. It seems like something that's, out of a movie. It's not something that I would have believed were possible. It's a truly dark moment. At the moment, we don't know much about this fella and why he did what he did. Only that he just decided that he was going to break in and hurt a lot of people. And the thing that connects this to the larger story of media and culture at the moment is that there is this politicization of media practitioners. And there's a very vigilant, virulent struggle between the media and politicians, namely President Trump. And that makes for a very interesting time for media. I think that there is this presumption that this fella is that. We don't know that he is. And that's been really the most dismaying part of this whole thing over the last few hours since it happened, was not so much that, just that this crazy person did a crazy thing, because crazy people do crazy things all the time. It's that the conclusions that have been jumped to. Now, I don't know. Maybe this guy is a deranged fan of Donald Trump who wants to take on the media and take them out. Or maybe he's just a mental case. Maybe he's just a deranged person. Maybe he has a personal beef with this newspaper or reporters at this newspaper. Maybe he's a former employee. Who the hell knows? But the strange and, I think, truly sad thing that emerged immediately was this was latched on to Donald Trump. And no doubt, Donald Trump has been at war with the media, at least the mainstream media, and the mainstream media has reciprocated. The two are essentially in this ongoing fight for what is for what is truth, for what is news, for survival, for prominence, and uh, and no doubt that's unignorable. Just in the story of the media and culture today, and politics at large, it's not even. It's not something that can be ignored. I can see why there would be an urge to point to Trump, and perhaps we'll see evidence that there is some connection. I don't know. But the trouble that I'm having is the folks who are presuming that there is automatically. Namely, David Simon. And David Simon is he's someone who I greatly admire. For those of you who don't know who he is, he was a journalist for the Baltimore Sun. He wrote the book that became one of my favorite TV shows ever, Homicide. And he went on to become the creator of The Wire and several other shows on HBO. And within a couple hours, I don't know whether he saw someone retweet this or he sought it out himself. He retweeted a tweet from Donald Trump calling the news media fake. The tweet is, "The fake news media, failing New York Times, NBC News, ABC, CBS, CNN, is not my enemy. It is the enemy of the American people." And Simon quoted us with, "Blood today in an American newsroom. Aren't you proud, you vile, fascist son of a bitch?" And I thoroughly respect Simon, but god damn it. I can't think of a more inappropriate thing to say at this moment. This has nothing to do with him. This has to do with a deranged person making a terrible choice. And this is the sentiment that I'm seeing from the left over the last few hours in a lot of places. Blaming this on Trump, and I don't see it. I don't see this one, not this one. Is he fighting the media? Sure. Is this on Trump? No. Not this one. You blame a lot on that guy, not this one. On the other hand, there was another element to this that I definitely think that you could, I think it's still a stretch, but you could make a causal connection to Milo Yiannopoulos. I don't find Milo an interesting figure, generally. I don't think he's all that smart. He's an interesting presenter, you know. He obviously knows how to command a room. He stands out. He calls himself a provocateur. He was thrown off Twitter for another incident. But I often don't give him much attention simply because he rarely says anything of note. Anything that seems more than hyperbole and just pseudo intellectual nonsense is what I would call it. So, when shortly after this news broke, I began to see stories that linked back to this one. It's from the New York Observer. Milo Yiannopoulos encourages vigilantes to start gunning journalists down. This is just from a couple days ago, the 26th of June. And I quote, "I can't wait for the vigilante squads to start gunning journalists down on sight," the right-wing nationalist told. Nationalist is strong, but the right-wing nationalist told the Observer over text message in response to a longer feature in development about an Upper East Side restaurant he's said to frequent. Boy. All right, so there's a lot in that quote, in how that quote is presented in this story. I find it strange. So they're writing a story about an Upper East Side restaurant. They reach out to Milo Yiannopoulos, I guess simply because he's famous and he goes there. And how does the conversation get to gunning down journalists? So that's totally out of context, and I find that strange. Secondly, where are we? Why is this being published? So the framing here, is that he's threatening journalists. So they were having a text message conversation with him, and was he being hyperbolic? Was he being facetious? Was he being sarcastic? If you do listen to Milo, and I have tried, he's hard to listen to. He's very hard to listen to. He's often sarcastic. He's often making a joke. Was this taken out of context? I don't know. It's kind of hard to say. And also, in text messaging and social media, it's hard to get any kind of context. So I find it strange that this is in an article to start. But the article goes on, and it gets more troubling, I think, on both sides. And when asked to elaborate on who specifically had upset him, Yiannopoulos explained that the statement was a standard response to a request for comment. That sounds like sarcasm to me. Awful sarcasm, especially in light of what has happened, but it sounds like sarcasm. Yiannopoulos also sent the message to the Daily Beast's Will Sumner in an article examining the struggling UK Independence Party, which the Conservative commentator is reportedly seeking to join as a part of. What an InfoWars host describes as a soft coup led by nationalist figures. InfoWars host. Which InfoWars host? That's kind of strange. It's very strange. Which one? Like, is it Alex? If it were Alex, I would think it would. If it were Alex Jones, I would think he would mention Alex Jones by name. It doesn't mention it as name. There's Paul Joseph Watson, who's another InfoWars host, who's semi-famous. He's a strange fellow, but and there are other ones you could point to, but they don't. Very strange. The article goes on. Yiannopoulos posted a picture on Instagram of the veiled threat issued to Summer, captioning it, "Where's the lie?" Once again, it does sound like dark humor to me. But that's just me. Over the last 18 months, the provocative nationalist has seen his career implode following a BuzzFeed report linking his tenure at Breitbart to known white supremacists and neo-Nazis. That doesn't quite explain what happened. As far as I know, Yiannopoulos saw his career at Breitbart start to fall apart following allegations that surrounding saying it was okay that he that his experience with an older man having sex with him as a child was okay. But okay. It goes on to say that after the piece's publication, Yiannopoulos lost funding from the Mercer family, known in the political world as prominent pro-Trump mega-donors, and subsequently elevated his racist rhetoric. Yiannopoulos didn't lose funding. Breitbart lost funding. Yiannopoulos was an employee of Breitbart. It doesn't quite compute there. This past weekend, the nationalist bragged on Facebook and Instagram that he sent $14.88 to the New Yorker's former fact-checker, Talia Lavin. According to the Southern Poverty Law Center, the number 1488 is a combination of digits popularly used by white supremacists and neo-Nazis. 14 to represent the infamous 14 words, a mantra for a future for white children, and 88 to represent Heil Hitler. Lavin is Jewish. That looks bad. I wouldn't defend that on any level. You are connecting dots there. Is it a stone cold fact? I don't know. But that looks bad. So, this is just 2 days ago that this article is published. And then within a couple days, we have a shooting at a newsroom. So a few hours ago, Yiannopoulos publicly spoke on Instagram saying that the truth is always the opposite of what the media tells you. I sent a troll about vigilante death squads as a private response to a few hostile journalists that were asking me to comment as a way to say F off. They then published it, amazed that they were taking it as a threat. I reposted their stories here to mock them and make clear that I wasn't serious. Headlines soon appear claiming I was inciting people to murder journalists. This is false. The only people whipping up hysteria about the killing of reporters this week were Will Sommer at the Daily Beast and Davis Richardson at the New York Observer. Now, on that point, I think he has a point. I don't think he's entirely guilt-free in this. To me, it screams a trolling move. It screams like a trolling remark. An unstable person could take a trolling remark and jump on it. The thing is, we have no proof that happened on any level. At all. This is just hours after the event happened. So if we have no proof that it happened that way, that this incited anything, to immediately jump to blaming him or Trump on this seems excessive. Is it possible? Sure. But it's excessive. You could also make an argument, and I think this is what Yiannopoulos is making here, his argument, is that by publishing widely a trolling remark that was a private response that he said to multiple journalists, by publishing it widely, that you may have influenced someone who may have actually gone through with something like that. So I'm left with two questions here. Why would you publish such a thing? It seems like the sense of humor, as dark as that is lost. It seems like context is being lost here. Yiannopoulos is a troll. Yiannopoulos is a provocateur. Yiannopoulos purposely says things that are awful to piss people off. It's widely documented. So to assume that Yiannopoulos is responsible for this man taking an action is a leap of faith of epic proportions. Now, I would love to have a bit more time to, and in fact, on the next show, I'll definitely, once we know a bit more, we'll go into it a bit further. But from my perspective, I think both sides of this equation are terribly wrong. Terribly wrong. There's no reason to publish it. No, none whatsoever, other than clickbait. And Milo Yiannopoulos shouldn't be running around the internet joking that way. And it just speaks to this dark place that I think we have come to where the left side of the media and the right side of the media and new media and sort of mid-traditional media, because I wouldn't necessarily call the Observer and the Daily Beast, New York Times, Washington Post, even CNN-style traditional media. The Observer and the Daily Beast are sort of in the middle. They're not in the newest fangled of commentary as Milo would be, or someone like Ben Shapiro or the Young Turks. These cats are sort of stuck in between worlds here. And many of these outlets feel that they're at war. And this choice speaks to them having the urge to put a scalp on the wall, to say that Milo is doing something awful, even if it's in jest. So, as is often in these types of circumstances, where there's a kerfuffle, and this is definitely a kerfuffle of epic proportions, there are consequences. So Milo has been building his own micro media brand. And he has been collecting money, payment for his content online through PayPal and Venmo in particular. And within a couple of hours of this incident, the support for money coming into Milo's operation was struck by Venmo and PayPal, which are a part of the same company. I don't know. I don't feel strongly that this is wrong. Definitely not as wrong as the Observer and the Daily Beast claiming that Milo was inciting this violence. I mean, these corporations aren't journalistic. Venmo and PayPal aren't journalistic outlets. They're not trying to uphold some sort of sense of truth. But on some level, it feels disappointing. On some level, it feels like, boy, the gray area is just disappearing. It's there's no sense of there's knowing the truth behind what happens doesn't seem to matter. So it'll be interesting to follow where Yiannopoulos goes from here. How he replaces Venmo and PayPal. I would imagine there's another smaller company that is in that space that would probably take his money. But it is a strange story and on an otherwise tragic day and a tragic moment. My heart goes out to those who died and those who were hurt. And I sincerely hope that this isn't the start of a trend. And barring some clearer evidence that Trump or Yiannopoulos are the cause of all this instead of a broader essence, I'm willing to reserve judgment. Sometimes I wonder why a person like Glenn Beck would go on CNN at all. I wonder why is it worth it for them? What are they getting out of it? Cui bono, who benefits? And from the moment that I noticed that Beck was going to be on CNN, I just had this feeling that it just wasn't going to turn out very well. And it was, I was definitely right here. He was on with Brian Stelter on Reliable Sources, and they discussed apparently not what was planned, but it was definitely an interesting experience.
A lot to get to. I know I mentioned before the break that you put on that Make America Great Again hat recently. You were trying to say something about the news media's coverage of him, about all the criticism of him. What were you trying to say?
Yeah, that you have become me, circa 2009.
Is that a compliment? Wait, is that a compliment?
Okay. I find Stelter's reaction kind of strange there. Beck looks dismayed. Stelter goes into like this preening grin as Beck says that you've become him circa 2009. For those of you who don't know the history of Glenn Beck, that was probably his peak borderline conspiracy theory period. Lots of Glenn Beck and chalkboard moments back there on Fox News and HLN. Before that, it was probably peak TV popularity at that point.
No, it's not. And you don't see it. None of you are willing to listen to what you're doing, and you're dividing us even more. We've had two people threaten the lives of either a congressman's child or the president's child. Where are the people that were so worried about language and the tone on television? You just had George Takei talking about Japanese internment camps. What's next? FEMA camps? Don't you understand what you're doing? You're driving people into the arms of Donald Trump. You're driving them into it.
I don't totally disagree. I think there are elements of that make sense. I do think the press is going through this overkill mode where everything is the worst thing ever, and I think especially I find the comparisons to the Holocaust in FEMA camps and not FEMA camps, but the Holocaust and internment camps to the border situation very strange. The situations are drastically different. The conditions were drastically different, and there aren't gas camps. There aren't gas. People aren't being gassed or killed. It's very incomparable. So I think Beck makes pretty solid points on that one.
Exactly.
Because
so that's what I'm trying to ask about. So when we point out that he's lying every day, it drives people into his arms. What is the right answer then? If we don't point out the lies, then what?
Well, first of all, you have to recognize the mistakes of the past. I can't take this border issue because I wasn't allowed into anybody's circle after my audience raised $3 million and we risked everything to go down to the border and we brought churches together. We actually fed the homeless. I was mocked for bringing them soccer balls, which people now say is a good thing because at least they have soccer balls at summer camp. And on the other side, no one in the media would even listen. No one would listen when I said,
Glenn, that's not true. There was lots of coverage of it in
DHS
2014. I remember you going to the border in 2014.
I think Stelter's right that there was lots of coverage. I think Beck is right that, I don't think Beck even made this claim, but the coverage was kind of tongue-in-cheek, and there was lots of making fun of the fact that Beck was kind of obsessed with the border at that time, and what was going on with Obama and the first ramp up, the last ramp up of border tension, for lack of a better term.
Obama's policy might have been ugly. It's a lot worse now.
Was there
Of course not.
this
There
kind
weren't
of
as many
coverage
as kids.
when you had?
There weren't as many
Of
kids
course.
in jail.
Oh, stop it!
Stop what? There were
it.
not as many
Stop
kids
it.
in jail.
You're telling me, so it's the number. So what's the number, Brian, that we care about putting kids in cages? What's the number that we start caring about when we're separating
care,
family,
and the
when
more
we're
there are,
separating
the more
children?
we care.
What's the number?
The worse
okay.
it gets, the more coverage there should be. Do you disagree with that? The worse
I'm sorry,
it gets,
but
the
you
more
know
coverage
it-
there should be.
Okay, so, boy, that came off really bad for Stelter there. Essentially, he's saying that we should care more about kids in cages when there are more kids in cages. That, putting one or dozens or hundreds of kids in cages, their lives and them being put in cages are worse, are not as bad as more kids being in cages. So if you have 100 kids in cages and you have versus 200 kids in cages, if we should care more about the lives of the 200 and not the 100, that sounds pretty bad. That sounds pretty off-putting. And he has no clue. It's not. These are people. These aren't. This isn't an oil spill. So that's pretty disgusting from my perspective. I don't get that kind of thought. Back when I was working in news, way back when, I remember this moment where I was talking to a reporter, and we were talking about doing a homicide over and over again, and she said, "It's a life, and a life matters." You can't get caught up in the numbers game, and the fact that Stelter is so removed from it that he is caught up in numbers, it feels disgusting to me. It just, I'm thoroughly disappointed in his response.
No, Brian. When we're doing things to children and breaking them up, no, I don't think there's a problem with covering if it's 10 kids. It should be covered. No one wanted to see it.
And when there's
by
thousands,
the way, that time...
there was a lot of
No,
coverage in
when there's a different
2014.
president.
But I respect that there's more now.
Look,
And-
Okay.
Sorry, go ahead.
Boy, things got awkward there. That's something you rarely see on cable news, where both parties look equally kind of like off-put by the scenario. Like Glenn, who's a TV vet, and Stelter, he's been at it for a while now too. You rarely get that awkward moment there. That's a very real moment of dismay on both ends.
This is why people who don't necessarily even support Donald Trump are saying, you know what? I've baked in the lies. I know. I got it. But the journalists now are like saying, well, two can play that game. neither one of you are self-aware enough to know that there is justice and mercy. One's arguing justice, one's arguing mercy, or they say they are, but they're not. All they're doing is playing politics, and the American people are tired of it. Who is talking about an actual solution on this? Who's actually done something? Who's actually consistent and cared when it was a Democrat in office and cared when it's a Republican in office? You know, those people exist around the country, and they're watching you two, the media and Donald Trump, playing this little game back and forth, and they're sick of it. They don't want to hear about it from either side.
I want the critique because I invited you on. I'm self-aware enough to know that we need to talk about this because I know it's a problem. The mainstream media is having a very hard time. The mainstream media is having a very hard time reaching Trump's base. That's a fact. We see that in all the polling.
Yeah, well, then here's the deal. Brian, you all have my phone number. I've reached out to all of you in the past and said, let's have a conversation not on the air. You really want to understand? You want to hear the other side?
Why can't our viewers?
Then let's have a conversation where everybody's...
I want to back up there for a moment. There's a moment here that made me a bit dismayed.
Media and Donald Trump playing this little game back and forth, and they're sick of it. They don't want to hear about it from either side.
I want the critique because I invited you on. I'm self-aware enough to know that we need to talk about this because I know it's a problem. The mainstream media is having a very hard time. The mainstream media is having a very hard time reaching Trump's base. That's a fact.
Okay. Very interesting how he puts that. Reaching Trump's base. Huh. I mean, you can take that phrasing any number of ways. I really wish there was a follow-up in there. Reaching Trump's base as in, like, they're not watching what you do. They don't care what you do. They don't believe what you do. Like, what do you mean by not reaching Trump's base? I find that this tidbit really interesting. I'd love to hear someone follow up with Stelter on this part.
We see that in all the polling.
Yeah, well, then here's the deal, Brian.
But
you all have my phone.
When he says we see that in all the polls, what does he mean? Does he mean that they don't believe what you're saying, or is it Trump's approval ratings being higher than you think they should be? What are you trying to say? I think this speaks to being able to preach from a bubble position. The fact that you're on high and you're not realizing that your message isn't quite connecting. That perhaps they don't buy your message. Not that they should buy your message. This speaks to me as a guy who is certain that he's correct. It is disappointed that the world doesn't agree with him. Or at least a part of the world doesn't agree with him in this case. Very interesting.
I've reached out to all of you in the past and said, let's have a conversation not on the air. You really want to understand? You want to hear the other side?
Why can't our viewers?
Then let's have a conversation where everybody's
not interested. Why
can't you tell our
viewers right now?
Because
I do find it strange that Beck is asking to have this conversation off air. I'm with Stelter on that one. Why not have it now? Why not discuss it out loud and in front of people?
It's all about ratings, because this is all about ratings. This isn't about ratings. This is about saving our country, bringing us together. Stop dividing us. I mean, I can't.
So to be clear, you think that I'm dividing the country? You think I'm dividing the country for ratings by booking you?
Brian, stop driving. Look at what you're doing. When did this become about you?
I get what Beck's coming there. Beck was speaking in micro. Stelter sort of did a poor man's judo trick, try to take something that was obviously macro and turn it into something that's micro, personalizing it, kind of antagonizing. I think he's trying to get good TV there, but Beck's not playing along.
This is about the media and the administration. That's what you guys want to make it into.
If it was about me, I would do like a 10-minute commentary the way you used to.
Wow. Beck looks so angry. He looks so angry. He's not even looking at the camera. He's like staring off into outer space. It just he's dismayed. It's the kind of thing you don't see on TV very often, where the host looks confused and the guest just looks so angry. He looks like he wants to throw a shoe at the camera. It's awesome.
If it was about me, I'd get out a blackboard the way you used to.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So the blackboard remark, for those who don't know, Glenn Beck is well known for his blackboard lessons. He does it less now than he did in the past. But in the past, he would spend weeks just like diagramming things on blackboards. Jon Stewart actually did an entire episode mocking this habit of Beck's.
Okay. Well, then maybe you should.
I mean, the point is...
Wow. Beck looks dismayed and just like he's staring back at the camera now. And Stelter just looks, very, very like... It seems like he's lost control of the situation.
What you mean making it about me? I don't see how I've made it about me. I want to know
It's not about...
It could. I don't. I wonder if he has any clue that he took something that was obviously macro and turned it micro, or is he just saying that, or is he just trying to pick the fight? It's one of the things that you find often with anchors, especially national anchors, who are used to guests who are following a very, very strict protocol. Whenever the guest goes into veers into a different direction that they were not expecting, they don't know how to handle it. We saw a very similar thing with Brooke Baldwin and Michael Rotundo, something that I want to touch on at another point on CNN another time, about a month ago, where Rotundo was not what she expected, and his answers weren't what she expected. Therefore, she seemed insulted by the fact that he wasn't playing by her script. And essentially, this is a very similar circumstance, I think, with Stelter and Beck as the joust continues.
You just said... Never mind. Look, Brian, if you want to have a conversation, the media really wants to know, great, we can have that conversation. But every time I've approached, everybody always says yes. But as soon as it gets tough or uncomfortable, nobody's interested. Nobody's interested in looking at themselves and saying, what did I do? I know what I've done. I've tried to make amends, and I'm trying to...
And we've talked about that before. I completely agree with you. And we all do need to be more self-reflective. I do have to ask you...
Okay, it seems like the two are just speaking different languages at the same time, and they're just not... They're just sort of like these ships passing in the night. What comes next is an extremely awkward segue.
There's this new headline on the Daily Beast saying that your company's in trouble, that you were trying to find a buyer. Is this related to the point about people not talking to each other? That if you want to create that media company, there's not interest? What's going on with that?
What a weird jump. I get that you want to ask him because that's news. If Beck is sailing to the Daily Wire or merging or whatever he's doing, that's news and that's worth asking. But boy, what a jump! Jumping from how the media in the country aren't talking to each other to like, hey, is your company in trouble? Boy, you really suck at your job, don't you? Wow. What a jump there.
Wow. Brian, thanks a lot. I think that's the most ridiculous question I've ever heard. I'm sitting here ready to talk to you about the detaining of children and parents and trying to break families apart, something that has been happening with Janet Reno. That's why it went to the Supreme Court in the first place. With Janet Reno, it's been happening. We want to stop it, and you want to play those games? Have a nice day.
What game did I just play? So the question...
Stelter has no idea that he just made an extraordinarily awkward jump. I don't know if they discussed it on any level before the interview and the pre-interview with the producers, but Stelter seems just mystified by it. He handles it well from an anchor perspective, in that he seems flustered, but he keeps his composure and he continues to march his way through the edge of the segment as Beck just yanks off his mic and walks away.
On the Daily Beast website, the headline says Glenn Beck's media empire is imploding. Again, that's the headline on the Daily Beast. It is well known that Glenn has been trying to sell the Blaze. There was talk about a deal with the Daily Wire. According to the Daily Beast, that fell through. You can read the full story on the Beast website. Frankly, I thought Glenn deserved a chance to address those reports. I hope he'll come back and talk about it.
Stelter, generally a tone depth, anchor from that perspective. I don't think he's a natural interviewer, at least not. He's not really an active listener, but that's really interesting, and as is the whole concept of what's going on with Beck's empire. The Daily Beast article. It's interesting the Daily Beast talk about media empires imploding, in that the Daily Beast has been imploding for the last few years. But okay. So the article, Glenn Beck's media empire implodes again. The conservative mogul's business woes continue via another round of layoffs in the depth of a sale to billionaires backing fellow right-wing media giant Ben Shapiro. The article goes on to say, conservative media firebrand Glenn Beck's media empire appears to be on its last legs after another round of layoffs and after a prospective high-profile buyer lost interest. A potential lifeboat in the form of a proposed sale to the billionaire owners of conservative commentator Ben Shapiro's website, The Daily Wire, now appears to be unlikely. A source familiar with negotiations told The Daily Beast talks between the two parties broke down, and the sale is effectively dead. The Blaze once generated a reported $90 million in revenue annually, but has been in a slow motion implosion over the last few years. Top-level and managerial shakeups, seemingly ceaseless layoffs, and office closures have depleted morale, tanked the site's web traffic, and caused cable distributors to jump ship. The most recent round of cuts are significant for the already hobbled company, which has shed employees with regularity for more than 2 years, largely without communicating to staff the reason or scope of the cuts. At one point, Beck blamed a round of layoffs on his own staff. So, Beck, Beck's empire is definitely in some hard times, and I do think that element is well worth discussing. I do think that it seemed shoehorned into the conversation that Beck and Stelter were having, and I totally understand. I totally understand why Beck just wouldn't want to have that conversation at that moment. When I look at Beck and when I look at Stelter in macro and just how he approaches his interviews, I find him. I think of him as a guy who's sort of he's a fellow who's playing the role of anchor. Like he doesn't seem like a natural at it. It's like he appears very often attempting to mimic what he thinks being an anchor is, instead of exuding the role. And I think that's why Stelter gets in so many awkward circumstances like this. Obviously, CNN loves him, so they're generally happy with this kind of thing. So Beck went on his show the next day, and he responded to, this, and he went on to explain his reasoning.
So yesterday, I was foolish enough to agree to go on CNN and Brian Stelter's reliable sources. I read his newsletter usually before I go to bed, and I have seen the increasing, I think, Trump derangement syndrome in that newsletter. And I say this as a guy who actually, it's fading, respects Brian Stelter. And I know he has just taken this as a badge of honor and glory, that I would say it this way. But I really thought Brian might be a guy that would actually be interested in what is going on. And what I was asked to do was to speak about the border of 2014 and also why the press cannot reach the Donald Trump voter. And I was foolish enough to think that they actually wanted a reason, and they wanted a logical explanation and to help them understand. But the media doesn't get it, and I don't believe they ever will. I don't believe that there is any actual desire to do anything other than to prove that they are right. And I understand this. I've lived that life before. It's a life that is not going to end well. It's just not going to end well for you. They live in this bubble where they don't have to take time to consider other people's point of view because, in the hallways, I've worked at CNN, in the hallways, everybody thinks alike. I mean, there might be some subtle differences, but pretty much everybody is on the same page. They are right in this particular case, and Trump or the Trump voter is wrong. And all they want to do is prove that they are virtuous and they are right. So they're not going to change their ways, and we should stop looking for it. I am going to stop engaging with them on this because
there's no interest. If there were interest, I would suggest that maybe they reach out and have a honest conversation. The average person says about Donald Trump, the average person, I don't necessarily like everything that he is doing. I don't like necessarily his personal behavior. I don't like his attacks on decency. I don't like all that. And I wish he would stop that. I wish he would stop and put his Twitter away. I really do. I think that's what the average person says. But they also say it's the economy, stupid. It's the economy, stupid. For the first time, somebody is paying attention to what I am afraid of. And what I am afraid of is this economy is going to collapse because we are moving in a direction that makes absolutely no sense, where everything is being ruled from government. So he is cutting taxes. I think he could have done more, but he did. He cut taxes. He cut taxes. Should he have cut spending? Yes, he should have. But he cut taxes. People felt that. He's cutting regulations. People are feeling that. What have you done lately, media? What have you done? He has chosen Israel over Hamas. And I know that's not popular, especially anyone who works anywhere near Christiane Amanpour. But the American people will pick Israel over Hamas and her allies at any day of the week, at any time of the day. The American people have also baked all of this in. Donald Trump has been a surprise to people like me. He has actually done some things that I never, ever thought that he would do. I thought he would be the typical New York liberal, like most people in the media. As it turns out, no. Look at his stance on Israel. Look at his stance on taxes. We have baked in the things before people even elected him. Come on. Rafael Cruz also helped kill JFK. Come on. Now, I found that really offensive and something that the future president of the United States shouldn't believe. I don't even think he believed it. So should he have said it? No. Did he? Yes. Did the American people see that and roll their eyes and go, stop it? He's just saying this just to whatever the reason is, but they've baked all of that in. They've even baked Stormy Daniels in. They don't care. They don't care. Just like you baked in the same trait from Bill Clinton and you didn't care. Oh, I know, but you said it was such. Yeah, I know. I know. It's crazy, isn't it? It's crazy how everybody is flipping sides depending on who it hurts.
Very interesting. I wish that the fissures weren't so deep, because I think the combination of what happened with Stelter and Beck there shows that the lack of connection, the lack of common ground, plausible, between the two parties. And I do think he makes a fair point. I would think the Trump voter had an idea of what they were getting, and they seem okay with it, at least polling wise. You know, obviously you got to take polling with a grain of salt, but that's an interesting conflict there between Beck and Stelter. I think we'll definitely hear more from both on this show to come. So for now, on that note, I'm James Brown. This has been the Evening Paper. And I good you good night.